The way audio engineers talk about and understand sound is a bit different from how we talk about sound in music. Before I studied music, people in music would describe sounds as either musical or noise. In music school, you learn to think of musical sounds in subjective terms, such as pitch, timbre, note duration, loudness, consonance, and a wealth of Italian terms for musical expression. This way of thinking promotes a musical understanding of sound, but it doesn't really help you to understand noise in general, or sound in its broader, wilder, more universal sense. In sound recording, and especially in what I call speaker music, that broader understanding becomes very useful. In critical listening, we identify and describe sound in more neutral technical terms, like frequency, amplitude levels, duration in seconds, harmonic spectrum, resonance, noise bands, etc. The field of art I work in embraces listening as a tool for discovery. As a way of building a closer relationship with the world around us. It's a non-visual way of understanding the world. This is what I mean, right? A relationship with the world through sound. Okay? In its most basic form, sound is vibration. Vibration implies change, and change happens over time. So sound becomes a description of change, right? Of what happens between the moment when change begins and the moment when it ends, when sound rests, when it becomes silence, right? When thinking of sound as description, we gain access to information about the event that produced it. In music, for example, we learn that a pizzicato, we learn what a pizzicato is, in contrast to a bowed string. These musical sounds take on qualities much like phonemes, syllables, and even words in spoken language when we use them to compose. Notice I'm trying to make a case for the existence and the beauty of noise. In music, we learn to recognize instruments by their sound: a piano, a violin, a synthesizer. Some people can even distinguish between two violins that look and sound almost identical. That kind of skill, that fine-tuning of perception, is what critical listening is meant to help develop. Take the class cherish it. It's like a gym for the ear, right? Besides describing the evolution of an event, every sound also carries two additional levels of information. One is the acoustical signature of the source, the fingerprint of the thing that made the sound. The other is the acoustical nature of the surroundings, information about location, distance, height, spatial motion, architecture, the environment. All that is encoded in the sounds that we hear. During this talk, I'll describe my work as it relates to each of these three dimensions of sonic information using both audio and video examples. Let's see what happens. Let's start with the idea of endophones. It's a fancy name for contact. And an endophone is a sound recorded from the source's own perspective. It reveals the inner acoustical life of the thing even being recorded, what it sounds like from within. That's my sound artist's mind at work. The engineer's mind at work maybe thinks about impedance match, right? Anybody knows what that is? It's like slow dancing between much mediums, right? Okay, so a contact mic reads information by basically taking the shape of the thing is being recorded. The first example I'll play is from a series of pieces I call Small Sounds. These pieces feature recordings made using vibrational transducers, such as phono cartridges and contact mics, to extract endophonic sound from small objects. Some of these objects include thin metal wires, cat whiskers, sewing thread, wooden sticks, beach sand, plastic and wooden toothpicks, etc. Each recording is a sound portrait of the small object being manipulated. Next is a video piece called Sound Consumption. It narrates the story of a burning wooden match. Something's still going on, is it? See, this is what I mean, right? Sound is a description of change, right? This is the story of this match. It burns for half of the time, and then the screen goes dark because the flame is extinguished, and yet the sound continues. So what is that sound telling us? Well, that wood contracts when it cools down. And it makes these sounds of the wood contracting, right? So the story continues, right? It's, sound portraits. A sound portrait is an electronic composition made specifically for a person or a performer. It begins with a short recording of their voice, a word, a phrase, a breath. Then I explore that material granularly, as if looking under a microscope. The result is a kind of abstract soundscape that captures audible qualities of the person's voice. For example, my piece Crypsis for poet Bob Gregory is built entirely from the granular exploration of the phrase so anyway so, captured in his own voice. Here's an example. Here's an excerpt.
I thought that one thing to do with the written word was to pretend that it was an object that could be bent. An object that tells of the loss, destruction, disappearance of objects, does not speak of itself. Think of the city, the edge of the city, and the traffic there. So anyway, when I was small, I was very good at hiding. In zoology, hiding is called crypsis. Hiding takes practice. We had moved from the city in the wintertime to a new house in the woods, a mile from anyone at all. And whenever I asked my brother what he wanted to do, he'd say, "Let's hide. Let's hide, man." Cuando jugamos al escondite, when we played hide and seek, he was happy. ¿Por qué nos gustara escondernos tanto? Yo no lo sé. Why did we like hiding so much? I don't know. So anyway, my father was happy there until spring. But then the frogs began calling. There were so many, and they were so loud. We thought at first it was monsters or people from outer space. But then we got used to it and went to sleep. But my father couldn't sleep that night, or any night from then on. Around midnight, he got up and went outside with a flashlight and some rocks from the driveway. He was out there a long time trying to hit them, make them shut up. But the frogs didn't care a thing about a man with flashlights. They just hid out. And as soon as he went back inside, they started to call again. So he told me and my brother $1 for every frog he killed. $1 was a lot of money in those days. We wanted to save up for a 55 DeSoto. In the ads it said, "Here is a car that translates your wishes into actions." Almost with the speed of thought itself. So anyway, we stalked them. But although we speared them with sticks, we tipped with finishing nails and shot them with a BB gun, a daisy. We only got the young and foolish ones. As it grew dark, we would wait in the silence, hoping we'd hit the grandfathers at last, but no. As soon as it was dark enough to suit them, they began to call. You know why they're doing that, my brother asked me? It's because they're horny. We thought that was pretty cool. Frogs might be slimy and have eyes that stick way out like pimples, but pimples you can see with. but they understand what's important in life, and they understand how to hide. I learned how to hide from them. In order to hide, you don't just get under something or behind something. You become something else. Then no one can get you. You don't even exist anymore. The old ones knew how to become some water or a piece of darkness. We'd walk right past them every time. Anyways, the Chinese used to believe that the earth sits on an enormous frog. The Egyptians had a goddess with the head of a frog. Her name was Hecate. Scientists say frogs are the first animals to evolve a true voice. And frogs are ancient symbols of fertility in Egypt. I used to wonder, why do they get him so mad? It was my mother's pond anyway. She gave the man on the bulldozer $10 to dig a hole. The next day it was full of water. She imagined a blue circle with cattails and dragonflies. But it was dirty brown all summer, and all summer we filled it with the floating corpses of silent frogs. When it was hot, it would stink. So anyway, at last, my father couldn't stand it anymore. They seemed to get louder and louder every night. Scientists have discovered by experiments that a female frog will move closer to the male frog who calls the loudest, goes on for the longest, and whose call is the most elaborate. That's the one she wants to propagate with, they found. So anyway, one day he borrowed a shotgun. It was an August night, dark and hot. We were out there with our spears. My brother saw him coming and said, "Man, let's hide." You could tell he really wanted to kill something. He blasted away every time he heard a single peep. He destroyed the cattails and the turtles, and he terrified the dragonflies. Got a little sapos abuelitos. They were still there. The neighbors called the police. They came and took the gun away. And gave him a lecture that made him mad. Anyway, he was not really a very happy man, my father. He didn't like getting up in the dark to go to work. He didn't like his job anyway. But he had to work hard to support his kids. He had a lot of kids. He didn't really like kids. But he was married, so he had them. He didn't really like the sour, angry woman he married either, but those were the rules. He did what he was supposed to. What did it matter how you felt about anything? Before the war, my father had been a musician. After the war, he came home. All his music was gone. His father had given his saxophone away to the Goodwill store. So anyway, time to grow up. He went back to college to get some kind of career. He was lonely. He met someone. He started learning how to hide. Think of the edge of the city.
I let that one go because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about a lot of things from my friend Bob Gregory, the poet. You know, he had a lot of ideas that he communicated with words, and but I was totally obsessed with the sound of his voice. So this piece was a little bit about trying to figure out how to do a piece that would just basically explore that timbre. And so this is the kind of thing that would happen. I had no idea it was going to turn out this way. Anyway, moving on, audibles. Okay, so I use the word audible to describe an arbitrary unit of abstract meaning in sound, equivalent to a phoneme or syllable, or even a word in language. Audibles are often fragments of an event. They can be musical sounds or noise. Here are two examples. Here's the next one. A noise melody, when audibles appear strung together, they form what I call a noise melody. Sequences of small, meaningful sonic gestures that unfold like a kind of language made of sound itself. Some sound melodies can be naturally occurring events featuring a single sound source, such as a coin toss, for example. Basically, when a coin spins on a table, it'll go and then slowly, lose its balance and then go, right? That's a whole story, similar to the match. Other sound melodies can be sound portraits of a source, right? Composed by stringing together audibles from that source's own sonic behavior presented out of sequence. An old shoe is a piece composed of audibles collected from performing inside the piano. Noise melodies can also be composed by combining audibles from infinite numbers of sources. Like in Anatomy of Desire, this is a soundtrack that I did for a film by Dinora de Jesus Rodriguez and the dancer Elena Cevenot. The film was supposed to be projected on the dancer who kept moving across the stage. The film is actually made in 16mm film, so the soundtrack was divorced from the film as it was presented. So I had to play this soundtrack, kind of like, okay, starting now. Oh, all right, so synchronize it on the spot. So now I move to what I call gated pieces that, I'm giving you these examples in somewhat of a chronological way. These ideas develop over time, but some of them kind of follow the previous ones. And of course, as I was doing these things, I wasn't totally aware of what I was doing. It's only after the fact that I go back and study what I did as an experiment and try to come up with some kind of a way of making sense of this. So a gated piece is often a kind of sound portrait where the live performer controls when you get to hear the pre-recorded sounds. A noise gate is used so that the background soundscape or noise melody is heard only when the performer makes a sound that triggers the gate open. In this way, the live performer becomes a gatekeeper for the pre-recorded world behind them, a collaboration between presence and memory. The first example is a gated memory of Gentle Giant, featuring guitarist improviser David Williams. that gives you a sense of what happens with the gated pieces. And they're constructed in such a way that you can actually play them together and still kind of get something out of it. Yeah, I know. And David Williams, yes. David Williams was a fabulous guitarist, improviser. And David is a fantastic improviser as well. So a lot of these music banks, if you notice, what's happening is these are performers who use their ears tremendously sharply, right? So whatever happens, they have to respond to it because they don't know what's going to come out of the tape either until they make a sound, right? So they make a sound, and if the sound is strong enough to kick the gate open, they'll hear something. And whatever that is, they have to respond to it because behind them, the tape is just going. They don't know where the tape is at the time the gate opens, right? So it's a surprise each and every time. So no matter how much they study this tape part, it's always a surprise, I believe. I'm always surprised to listen to them perform it every time they do. So anyway, the next set of pieces I call site-specific sound installations. So I also work with architecture. My site-specific installations are created for particular spaces. They are also portraits that reveal the acoustical identity of a building or an environment, usually through tones tuned to the site resonance frequencies. These works sometimes include those sounds found on the site or somehow related to the site. For example, in the like the grasshoppers in Soundscape with Grasshoppers. And I know you know the sound of grasshoppers already. In this type of pieces, you can walk around the space and hear different perspective of the same sounds. So the other piece I'd like to show you is called Quail Roost Sanctuary, where I brought in the quail. This is a public art sound installation that just unveiled in September, and it's supposed to be making sound in perpetuity at a outdoor location. It's a breezeway in the Quail Roost Station in Miami. Next, I'm going to show you a video that illustrates how I find the acoustical frequencies in a space. Okay, other technologies that I use when I'm making stuff. Many of my pieces explore new and unusual technologies for specialization and sound gathering. I work with multi-channel and ambisonic systems, like in Sound Poem in Surround.
Later. What are you doing in that area?
Pasamos en el huracán, por favor, si alguien oye.
Tenemos la suerte en medio de esa desgracia de poder conocer este caso y de poder conocer el mundo en otros lugares puede suceder esto
Y otras cosas más que pueden suceder.
Iverson, Holanda. Ha llegado a la capital de Bosnia, Sarajevo, el Fondo Internacional de las Naciones Unidas para la Ciudadanía.
والمشرف العام على مجمع خادم الحرمين الشريفين الدكتور عبد الرحمن الواسع وزارة الأوقاف في جمهورية مصر العربية في إدارة التاريخ metaphorical mechanism.
Example 2 is a toadfish recorded on the water using a hydrophone. That was it. That's a single toadfish. All right. Now, to get that sound, I had to get not only the hydrophone. I mean, it's always fortunate because you can't see where the fish is. You know nothing. You just drop like when you're fishing, So I happened to catch this one, and close enough that I can isolate it as well. So the sound that you hear is just the sound of the fish. I have also worked with ultrasonics and hypersonic sound. In Paranormal Etude, I collected audibles captured above 20,000 hertz, well beyond the range of our human hearing. This soundscape was composed from the downsampling of the ultrasonic recordings. Sounds that happen way, way, way up there where the bats live, in terms of the audio spectrum. And of course, when you bring them down, you're changing their quality. You're changing, these sounds are supposed to be happening a lot faster than what we're hearing right now. And when I stretch them, certain things happen to the sound that become kind of interesting sound artifacts. So I play with those because we don't really know what they sound like way all the way up there. And I don't think we'll ever know. So when I record bats, for example, and I downsample them, they sound like birds. So I can tell the difference between a bat and a bird by transposing the sound out like, 3-4 octaves to be able to hear it, right? So as you transpose a sound an octave, it also becomes twice the duration, right? And like that. So the sounds that we're hearing, pew, 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 are probably happening, pew, 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 exactly, okay. And not even, pew, 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 like. All right. Okay, in small sounds on a tabletop, hypersonic sound projections make it seem as if invisible tiny objects are moving around a table, like acoustic magic. Unfortunately, I don't have a good audio sample to show you of what this sounds like, but the piece is right now installed in an exhibition in the Ray. The Ray is a little bit far away, but if you find yourself anywhere near the Ray before January 24th, you can go and check this out. It's worth listening to live. Okay. Anyway, all the techniques I have described come from listening deeply and differently. Each one begins with curiosity about what sound can tell us about an object, a place, a person, or even ourselves. My work is simply about listening not just to music, but to the world itself. When we listen carefully, sound stops being only a byproduct of what happens. It becomes a way of knowing. Every sound carries a story of its source, its space, and its movement and evolution in time. If you train your ears to hear those stories, you'll begin to find music everywhere, not only in what you create, but also in how you live. Thank you. So don't be afraid to ask any questions. I'm sure you have many, or maybe not.
So when you were doing the resonance pieces, you have on a pole a microphone.
Yes.
And basically fishing for feedback, resonant frequencies
Yes.
in the room.
Yes.
Record that? Record that as a
Yeah, of course, I record that in order to be able to analyze the results. So, or you can use, a frequency measuring device, and record that. I find that for me the easiest thing is to record the event and then worry about it later, because I can take my time, kind of, and I don't know why this is, but for instance, if you know about audio tools, like I use Audition, Adobe Audition. I also use isotope tools for determining the frequency of the sound on the screen, and sometimes one program tells me something and the other one tells me something else, and that's a little bit frustrating, because in terms of organizing these pieces in architecture, the actual tone, if you tune a tone to that resonance, you hear the resonance, right? And that is what makes the magic, right? But if you're off a little bit, then all of a sudden the piece doesn't work as well, right? So these pieces are, the secret of these pieces is accuracy, because what you're trying to do is reveal the acoustical qualities of the room, of the space. And that happens when you're, some people say, well, why don't you do this live, with actual feedback? Well, that's problematic because it's hard to control. I control it in the process of recording But I don't necessarily like that sound because I have to compress it. I have to do all kinds of different things to it that, I don't find as elegant. And then I create the pieces that I show you with beautiful tones and these, and I feel more like a composer when I do it that way.
It doesn't have to be unstructured. Like it can be the outputs can be any sound.
Every sound.
You just can put them together as you please.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What happens when you take a sound that somebody gives you, and then somebody else comes in and gives you another sound, and these two sounds have nothing to do with each other? Well, when you put them together side by side, you start learning much more than when you listen to one sound alone. What do I mean? Well, all of a sudden you're comparing space, right? This sound was recorded in a different room than this one, right? So all of a sudden you hear two different reverberations next to each other. And by doing that, wow, like the contrast becomes really striking, right? And so that excites me. It's like, wow, listen to that. And now I know a little bit more about resonance. And where was this room? Which room is that? Oh, this is not a room. This is a electronic river. Oh, okay. There's a big difference between electronic river and and acoustics, right? So these are the sounds you want to learn. You want to get to know the world this way. Is what my advice would be. And the more you get to know it this way, the easier time you'll have in front of the computer trying to make a mix or, create anything you want to create. It's about understanding the sounds that are right there in front of you. And, okay, what does this sound want to do? Sometimes we want to say, oh, what do I want this sound to do? And I say, well, I don't know. What does the sound want to do? And sometimes that's much better than what you want to do to it, and so on, right? So, but you can get to decide these things by, by the kind of relationship you build with sound, basically.
How would you say is the best way to approach kind of that storytelling aspect without specializing you for it?
So I think that basically what I'm talking about is an attitude to sound. So when you hear a sound, if you assume there's a story behind that sound, in other words, something happened that made that sound be. So what happened? Oh, maybe somebody put their finger on the G string on a cello and then bowed with this much pressure and this and that. If you hear it that way, what I'm describing, instead of saying, oh, that's a G, it's like in music, it's like, okay, it's a G and that G relates to the other note like this and that. And now you're thinking about other stuff. But if you concentrate on the sound itself and the timbre and how that note on that string sounds different from the same note on the other string, and the pressure different from this one, and you start recognizing these two sounds. And sometimes what sounds like is really kind of almost the same, because in music, one of the ideas is that you try to blend your sound to another musician, right? So you try to imitate and things start sounding more alike. And that's desirable in some musical contexts, right? But for me, the identifiable thing, right, what makes the two things different is what, wow, right? So that's what does that help you? Yeah, it's okay, great. So.
And I was going to say, you might be wondering, but how does this apply to commercial music? And I think that those folks that are innovators and have experimented with sound as musicians and as sound engineers have created a much richer palette. And when you listen to the music of people like David Bowie, or Brian Eno, or Pink Floyd, or you hear that artists are trying to make a distinctive sound. They want to stand out from the crowd. And sometimes they quite often incorporate it without Stockhausen, without John Cage, we probably wouldn't have the palette of sounds available that we have today in commercial music.
And some of the sounds that traditionally during my presentation, I talked about, when I was young, the people that I met that were musicians, right? They describe, sound in terms of like musical sounds and noise. Usually what they mean by noise were sounds, undesirable sound, right? At least in music, right? So for instance, if you play a note on the cello, you didn't want it to sound noisy. You want it to sound musical, right? Exactly. That was the implication. So what happens with people like Cage and all that is all of a sudden they start bringing the idea of noise into the musical, kind of language. And for instance, one way that started to happen was through percussion. So in the 40s, John Cage started a percussion ensemble. It was only percussion instruments. And he wrote these wonderful pieces just for percussion, right? And he invented a few things like the gong on the water, like that's one of the things that he kind of invented, along the way, right? Why? Because they were doing a concert around a pool, and so he had a gong, and then he put the during the performance he put the thing on the water, so stuff like that, right? And he used to use like car, brake drums and things like that, right? So a whole lot of the percussion instrument collection of instruments that have become now, because there are pieces written for those instruments that become part of musical scores, and now musicians have to learn to play them, and they have to have the instrument, right? So if they want to play those pieces. And more, I think, which is, really, really good, orchestras are beginning to pay attention to that kind of music and play it. And they're finding that people actually enjoy that music as well. So that's helping to save the orchestra, because when I started in 1983, I graduated from music theory and composition, and I was writing, music for string quartets, and I wrote a couple of orchestra pieces, and the orchestra pieces were, I had percussion instruments, a prepared piano in my, that kind of thing. I was exploring timbre through the orchestra. Back then, the word was, why are you writing an orchestra piece? And I said, well, I don't know. I went to school and I was taught how to write, and I want to write an orchestra piece. I just want to, right? But they would say, well, but what orchestra is going to play it? The orchestras are dying because people aren't going to the orchestra anymore. Back then, that was the word, right? And I think that's no longer true. The New World Symphony, for instance, in Miami, is made a tremendous contribution to the idea of the orchestra being kind of a contemporary thing, a contemporary instrument, as well as a vehicle for learning about early music and all kinds of different music, written for orchestral instruments. So I think it's exciting when that happens.